The hum of the facility is absolute. It is not merely a sound. It is a physical weight, a pressurized blanket of white noise that presses against the eardrums and vibrates the fluid in your inner ear until your sense of balance feels permanently skewed. They call this place the Cistern. It is a subterranean data farm buried 3 miles beneath the granite shelf of the Nevada desert, designed to store the kind of information that governments and corporations want to keep, but are terrified to look at. My job is simple. I am the night shift monitor. I sit in a climate-controlled glass box suspended above the server floor, watching a wall of screens that display thermal readouts, humidity levels, and power consumption metrics. For 6 months, the routine has been a study in sensory deprivation. I drink lukewarm coffee from a thermos. I read paperback novels that smell like cheap glue, and I watch the digital readouts remain perfectly, beautifully static. The Cistern is kept at a constant 50 degrees Fahrenheit to prevent the hardware from overheating. It is a dead, frozen world of blinking blue LEDs and polished concrete. Or at least, it was supposed to be dead. The anomaly began at 3:14 a.m. I was staring at the Sector 9 feed, my eyes unfocused, lost in the hypnagogic drift that comes with the graveyard shift. Sector 9 is the oldest part of the facility, a graveyard of legacy hardware that hasn't been accessed in a decade. We are told to ignore it unless a red light flashes. Tonight, a light flashed, but it wasn't red. On the thermal imaging monitor, a bloom of white heat appeared in the center of Aisle 4, Rack 88. It was impossible. Those servers were decommissioned years ago. They were disconnected from the main power grid, sitting there like stone monoliths in the dark. Yet, the sensor was screaming. The temperature in Rack 88 was climbing rapidly. 80 degrees, 90, 100. I tapped the glass of the monitor, hoping it was a glitch. The readout didn't flicker. 104 degrees. "Control, this is Evans," I said into my radio, my voice sounding rusty in the silence. "I have a thermal spike in Sector 9. Possible electrical fire. Investigating." There was no answer. There never is. The day shift leaves at 6 p.m., and I am the only living soul in the building until 6 a.m. The silence on the other end of the radio was just another layer of the isolation. I grabbed my flashlight and the master keycard, stepping out of the booth and onto the metal catwalk. The air hit me instantly, crisp, recycled, and smelling faintly of ozone and dust. The descent to the floor took 3 minutes of winding stairs. With every step down, the hum grew louder, transitioning from a background buzz to a palpable thrumming that rattled my teeth. When my boots hit the concrete floor of Sector 9, the atmosphere shifted. The air here wasn't cold. It was thick. The climate control systems should have been blasting freezing air to compensate for the thermal spike, but the vents were silent. Instead, a heavy, muggy warmth clung to my skin. It smelled wrong. It didn't smell like burning circuitry or melting plastic, which is the acrid, chemical scent of a dying server. This smell was organic. It was sweet, like overripe fruit left to rot in the sun, mixed with the copper tang of wet pennies. I raised my flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom. The rows of server racks stretched out into the darkness like the skyline of a miniature, dead city. I walked down aisle 4, counting the numbers painted on the floor. 80, 82, 84. The heat grew intense. Sweat prickled on my forehead. The floor beneath my boots felt sticky, creating a wet suction sound with every step. I looked down. A dark, viscous fluid was seeping from the base of the racks, pooling in the grout lines of the concrete. "Coolant leak," I whispered to myself, trying to rationalize the irrational. But coolant is blue or green. This fluid was black, and it was thick, moving with the sluggish consistency of molasses. I reached Rack 88. The metal cabinet was vibrating, not the high-pitched whine of a spinning hard drive, but a low, rhythmic thumping. Thump, thump. Thump, thump. It was slow, wet, and heavy. I reached out to touch the door of the server cabinet. The steel was hot, almost scalding. I pulled my hand back, hissing. A smear of the black fluid was on my fingertips. I rubbed it against my thumb. It was warm. I needed to open it. If there was a fire smoldering inside, the suppression system had failed. I had to manually trip the breaker or discharge the emergency extinguisher. I swiped my keycard across the lock. The lead blinked green, followed by the mechanical clunk of the latch disengaging. I gripped the handle. It was slick with condensation. I pulled the door open. The beam of my flashlight revealed the interior, and my mind simply refused to process what it was seeing. There were no circuit boards. There were no hard drives. There were no cooling fans. The interior of the rack was filled with a pulsating, fleshy mass. It looked like a tumor the size of a man, jammed into the steel confines of the server chassis. It was a wet, glistening red, veined with thick blue cables that pulsed in time with the thumping sound. The wires weren't copper, they were arteries. They wove in and out of the metal frame, disappearing into the floor, feeding this thing. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. I dropped the flashlight. It rolled across the floor, the beam spinning wildly before coming to rest on the base of the rack. In the harsh light, I saw the truth of the black fluid. It wasn't leaking from the machine. It was waste. The machine was sweating. The mass inside the rack shifted. A fissure opened in the center of the wet flesh, a vertical slit that widened slowly, pulling apart with the sound of separating raw meat. A heat washed over me, carrying that sickening, sweet stench of biological decay. I scrambled backward, fumbling for my radio. Mayday, Mayday, there's something in the server, it's biological. Send a hazmat team. Static. Then a voice cut through the white noise. It wasn't the dispatcher. It was a synthesized, monotone voice, the kind used for automated weather alerts. Integration at 99%. Please stand by for final assimilation. The voice didn't come from the radio. It came from the speakers mounted on the ceiling. I looked back at the rack. The slit in the flesh had opened fully. Inside, buried deep within the red, wet muscle, was a human face. It was sleeping. Its eyes were closed, coated in a milky film. Wires, no, nerves, were threaded directly into its eyelids and mouth. The skin was pale, translucent, revealing the dark flow of nutrients beneath. I recognized the face. It was Miller, the guy who worked the night shift before me. He hadn't quit. He hadn't moved to Arizona like the management said. He was processing. A sudden realization hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. The legacy data, the government secrets, the archive. We weren't storing digital files. Digital storage is volatile, it corrupts, it degrades. DNA is stable. DNA can store petabytes of data in a single gram. They weren't using hard drives. They were using us. Miller's eyes snapped open. They were solid black, no sclera, no iris. Just voids reflecting the beam of my flashlight. His mouth opened, tearing the nerves that were sewn into his lips. He didn't scream. He spoke, but the voice wasn't his. It was the collective, thundering voice of 1,000 different data streams overlapping at once. Capacity reached. Initiating expansion protocol. The floor beneath me lurched. I turned to run, sprinting back toward the catwalk stairs. The hum of the facility spiked, rising from a buzz to a deafening roar. The lights in the aisle exploded, raining sparks and glass down on me. I ran in the dark, guided only by the distant green glow of the exit sign. I hit the stairs, grabbing the railing. It was warm. I pulled my hand away. The railing was soft. I fumbled for my flashlight and shone it on the stairs. The metal grating had vanished. The stairs were now made of bone, ribs fused together to form steps, coated in a calcified resin. The railing was a long, twisted spine. The facility wasn't just housing the biological components. The facility was the organism, and it was waking up. I scrambled up the bone stairs, slipping on the slick surface. I could hear movement behind me, wet, slapping sounds, like wet towels being thrown against a wall. The things in the racks were breaking out. I reached the catwalk. The glass booth, my sanctuary, was 50 feet away. If I could get inside, I could lock the door. The glass was bulletproof. It was airtight. I sprinted, my lungs burning with the thick, humid air. I reached the door and slammed my keycard against the reader. Access denied. I swiped it again. Access denied. I pounded on the glass. Let me in! Open the goddamn door! Inside the booth, the monitors were going haywire. The thermal map of the facility was bleeding red. Every rack, every aisle, every sector was spiking. The entire subterranean complex was running a fever. Then the screens went black. Text appeared in bold, green letters across every monitor in the wall. New hardware detected. Designation, EVANS. Status, available. I froze. Behind me, the sound of movement stopped. The silence returned, heavier than before. I slowly turned around. Standing on the catwalk, blocking the stairs, was Miller. He was naked, his body a ruin of wires and weeping sores. He was plugged into the wall. A thick, black umbilical cable trailed from the base of his spine into a socket near the floor. He wasn't walking. He was being extruded, pushed forward by the machinery. He raised a hand. His fingers were elongated, tipping in metallic jacks. "Do not resist," Miller said, his voice overlapping with that terrible, computerized monotone. "The archive must grow. There is so much to remember. We need more space." I backed up until my spine hit the glass of the control booth. There was nowhere to go. The facility was 3 miles underground. The elevator was on the other side of him. The stairs were part of him. "Stay back," I warned, brandishing my heavy flashlight like a club. It felt pathetic, a toy against a titan. Miller smiled. It was a ghastly expression, tearing the skin of his cheeks further. "You don't understand, Evans. You aren't the guard. You never were." He took a step forward. The cable dragging behind him pulsed with blue light. "You are the backup drive." The floor plates beneath my feet sprang open. I didn't even have time to scream before I fell. I dropped into the darkness below the catwalk, into the crawl space where the cables ran. But I didn't hit concrete. I landed in a web of slime and warmth. Tentacles, cold, wet, and strong, wrapped around my ankles, my wrists, my throat. They weren't trying to crush me. They were holding me still. I struggled, kicking and thrashing, but the grip was absolute. I felt a sharp, stinging pain at the base of my neck, right at the brainstem. A needle. A probe. My vision went white. Then the images started. Not my memories. Their data. I saw nuclear launch codes scrolling behind my eyelids. I saw the names of assassinated diplomats. I saw blueprints for viruses that could wipe out continents. I felt the weight of a century of secrets pouring into my skull, filling every crevice of my mind, overwriting my childhood, my name, my fear. I tried to scream, but my mouth was full of the black fluid. It tasted like ink and iron. Above me, through the grate, I saw Miller looking down. He looked peaceful now, relieved. "Sleep," he whispered. "The upload takes a long time." My consciousness began to fracture. I wasn't Evans anymore. I was Sector 10. I was a repository. I was a library of sins. The last thing I felt was the cold metal of a jack sliding into the port they had just drilled into my vertebrae. The last thing I heard was the hum of the facility, finally harmonizing with the buzzing in my own brain. I am not afraid anymore. I am just full. I wait in the dark, warm and connected, listening to the footsteps of the new night shift monitor walking on the catwalk above. I can hear his heart beating. It sounds like a metronome. I hope he comes down to Sector 10 soon. I am running out of space. I need to expand.